Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I did find very particularly interesting. And this video is going to be by the boxing channel known as DontesBoxingNation. And what I'm going to review in this video is basically him talking about a multitude of topics. And this video somewhat is mainly going to be about the great performance that Mr. Shakur Stevenson had in that great unification matchup between that of Shakur Stevenson and Oscar Valdez. Now, of course, a certain amount of you may ask, well, if we're overall mainly talking about the Oscar Valdez versus Shakur Stevenson fight, why overall did you name the title, or why all in all is this video about Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez? Well, the reason why that is because Dante's Boxing Nation, with one of the statements that Shakur Stevenson said yesterday, of course, could not help himself like usual. And once again, Dante's Boxing Nation, just like a lot of these other channels, including the new media channels, who overall, once again, usually have a very big pro-racial issue. The reason why they talk so much about Canelo Alvarez is because not only to get views and somewhat, popularity, but they basically want to tear down Canelo Alvarez's career to the point to where they want you to believe, no matter who you are, that the only reason why Canelo Alvarez is ranked as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter on so many media outlets and so many lists out there is because basically he's this big white hype, or basically, he's this person all in all that has the complexion for the protection. And he's cherry picking all these fighters and he's not taking any big fights, which of course, if you've been in boxing for a very, very long time, you know that that's a bunch of horseshit anyway. Don't get me wrong. That's not me saying that I agree with every single one of Canelo Alvarez's moves. But for the most part, I think that Canelo Alvarez has been accomplishing a lot of history. Let me also address something here, and we're going to talk about a couple things in this video. A certain amount of people, when I named my video, I believe this was a couple of weeks ago now, or somewhere around there. When I posted the video last time, I think I posted about Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. I basically titled the video, I said, is Canelo Alvarez a great big white hype? And a certain amount of people came in the comment section, they came on the video, and I think that maybe some of them were offended or felt that I was being disrespectful towards that of Canelo or the country of Mexico, and I certainly was not trying to do that. Basically, the reason why I titled the video why I did is because these new media channels especially, they take a look at Canelo Alvarez as a great big white hype. That's what they try to deploy to the public. That is mainly the narrative that they try to put out there. My titles mainly are usually overall titles that, are somewhat controversial, because those are usually the narratives that I'm going to be addressing and that I'm going to be talking about, especially from videos that I find somewhat controversial, or a narrative that I think maybe can somewhat be incorrect, or that may have no context behind it, And Dante's Boxing Nation, it's no offense against him, but 99% of the time when I usually see a video from him, he's usually trying to push some emotional pro-racial bullshit. It just is what it is, especially when it comes to someone like that of a Saul Canelo Alvarez, because he hates this man. He hates this man. He takes a look at Canelo Alvarez as a great big white hype. At least that's what he wants you to believe. I don't think that he 100% believes that all the way, but he has to get the public to believe that. So basically he can say that if Canelo Alvarez loses, or, depending on what his fights look like, or depending on whatever happens, he can say, see, I told you, Canelo Alvarez was this great big white hype. The only reason why he was ranked that high is because he had the complexion for the protection, which once again is not the case. Now, don't get me wrong. Could someone maybe label Canelo Alvarez as a Caucasian Hispanic? Maybe they could. And a certain amount of people, they would not even agree with that. Listen, what I label Canelo Alvarez personally as is mestizo, which basically means all in all that I believe that he is of a mixed demographic, especially in that of the country of Mexico. But if one person maybe were to call Canelo Alvarez a Caucasian Hispanic, listen, you can take a look at some of his features. Canelo Alvarez, very obviously, he does have certain Caucasoid or Caucasian features. It just is what it is. Now, I would not label him 100% Caucasian, but these channels do. That's just the way that they do it. And the reason why that is because that's how they get a lot of these followers. Unfortunately, they trick a lot of people because they tell them what they want to hear and they don't tell them what they need to hear. No, Canelo Alvarez is not ranked as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter because overall he is just this great big white hype of a fighter. No, he's not just ranked as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter because he has the complexion for the protection. Now, don't get it twisted. Don't get it wrong. Are there certain fighters that, once again, they will have the complexion for the protection, and overall they will be treated in a much better light, or, they will have to do less than certain black fighters in maybe that of the sport of boxing, or maybe other sports? Certainly. You can argue that that happens overall in certain sports, maybe even every day. But don't sit here and tell me that Canelo Alvarez, who has repeated A-grade fighter after repeated A-grade fighter after repeated A-grade fighter in the sport of boxing, don't sit here and tell me that Canelo Alvarez is just ranked the #1 pound for pound just because of this, oh, it's a racial thing. No, Canelo Alvarez is ranked the #1 pound for pound fighter because Canelo Alvarez not only has the resume for it and has beaten so many great fighters, but on top of that, he is a 4-weight division champion, unified completely a weight division in one of them at the 168-pound division. He also is a person that is debatably the most skilled boxer in all of boxing right now, and he looks debatably the most dominant. And it is not just Caucasians or Latinos that are calling Canelo Alvarez the #1 pound for pound fighter either. So even if you were going to make the case that, well, you know, certain other races are, you know, basically banning for Canelo Alvarez to be the #1 pound for pound, you know, to basically make black fighters, you know, make black fighters look bad and yada, 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 that would not even completely work 100%, at least not to a certain degree, because certain black fighters that have overall commented about racism against black fighters in the past, like that of a Jamal Charlo or Devin Haney, Gervonta Tank Davis, they have even called Canelo Alvarez the true #1 pound for pound fighter. So what does that really tell you about Canelo Alvarez? It tells you that Canelo Alvarez has a lot of respect from his peers. It tells you that Canelo Alvarez, that in my view, that not only is he a great fighter, in my view, Canelo Alvarez is truly an all-time great fighter. And some people, I don't think that they, you know my definition, at least, of an all-time great fighter. An all-time great fighter, in my opinion, is someone that if they were to retire today, you know, at least, you know, if their career is not completely finished, if they were to retire today, not only were they first ballot Hall of Famer, but they were debatably probably one of the top 5 best fighters pound for pound of their generation. That's why, you know, I made a video recently also about Mr. Tyson Gypsy King Fury. And a lot of people, they disagreed with me when I called Tyson Fury an all-time great fighter. And just to talk about that really quickly, I'm not going to digress too much, but the reason why I call Tyson Fury an all-time great fighter is because, in my opinion, he truly is. Because Tyson Fury, when you take a look at him, he has a great win over the all-time great Vladimir Klitschko. He has a great win over the, you know, great Deontay Wilder. I'm not saying that Deontay Wilder, in my view, was an all-time great fighter, but Deontay Wilder was pretty much this generation's George Foreman. He was a fighter that was a big bruiser. Was he a fighter that, you know, probably was even as skilled or, you know, as powerful as what a George Foreman was? Probably not, but George Foreman, you know, he basically was somewhat of the Deontay Wilder for his day. He was a person that more than likely was going to beat 99% of the other fighters out there, but as soon as he fought a fighter that could handle his size and his power, and overall that plan A, kind of like what a Muhammad Ali was able to handle, he more than likely was not going to be able to get past him. That's what Deontay Wilder is for this generation. All right, that's what he is for this generation. So Tyson Fury was able to get past this generation's version of George Foreman, in my opinion. He also was able to get past Vladimir Klitschko. And then, of course, he recently got a victory over Dillian White. In my view, the wins over Deontay Wilder, the couple of wins that he has over Deontay Wilder, and also the win that he has over Vladimir Klitschko, and the fact that at one point in time he was somewhat almost a completely unified heavyweight champion of the world, and then on top of that winning the WBC a little bit later on. So I believe that he has won every single main heavyweight belt in his career. There's no denying it. Tyson Fury is the first ballot Hall of Famer, and in my view, he is an all-time great fighter. He's up there with the likes of Andre Ward, Joe Calzaghe, Bernard Hopkins, Tommy Hearns. He's somewhere within that category, and certain people may not even, agree with me putting him there. But I put Tyson Fury on that level because when I take a look at his victories, when I also take a look at his skill set, Tyson Fury, in my view, is clearly the best and, in my opinion, the most accomplished heavyweight of this era. There's no denying that. It just is what it is. But anyways, moving on, DontesBoxingNation, of course, in his regular type of fashion, he is going to try to make the argument that once again that Canelo Alvarez, that he avoids a lot of the top tier competition and that he puts his career on easy mode and all sort of bullshit when it comes down to it. And once again, that's not me saying that I agree with every single move that Canelo Alvarez makes. But his next fight is going to be over the WBA light heavyweight champion of the world, the undefeated and very decently dominant light heavyweight champion of the world, in Dmitry Bivol. This is not going to be any ordinary easy task. So Canelo Alvarez has taken repeated challenge after repeated challenge after repeated challenge. And I'm sorry, but if you're asking me personally, in my opinion, do I think that Demetrius Bubu Andrade, Jamal Charlo, David Benavidez, even though talented fighters as they are, do I believe that any of them had the percentage of a chance of beating Canelo Alvarez the same way that a Dmitry Bivol has? Not even close. Not even close. That's just the way that I look at it. But anyways, just continuing onwards. But Dante is also going to try to make the point that Canelo, that he would lose to certain other black fighters like that of a Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Shakur Stevenson, probably a Devin Haney as well, that he would lose to those certain fighters if he was in another weight division, which of course is a hypothetical. If that's what you truly believe, then that's what you truly believe. But I just find it interesting because Dante, I don't see him trying to make any other hypotheticals about any other fighters. When he was calling Deontay Wilder one of the top 4 pound-for-pound fighters in the world at one time, he never brought up how Deontay Wilder probably would have got beat by Terrence Crawford or someone else had they been in the same weight division. No, Deontay Wilder was a great heavyweight when he was an undefeated, fighter, and they wanted to promote him as the best heavyweight of this generation. All of a sudden, Deontay Wilder's just some pushover now that they don't want to promote Tyson Fury as a decently great fighter. But anyways, not to digress too much, let's get into the video. Let's see what Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation has to say.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So you guys may recall a couple of weeks before the fight when it comes to Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez. Shakur Stevenson, he was interviewed, and he was asked to give his thoughts on Valdez training with Canelo Alvarez. And Shakur Stevenson, he said, I believe I would beat Canelo Alvarez. If we were in the same weight class, I would outbox him just as easily as Floyd Mayweather did. So he can tell Oscar Valdez whatever he wants, it ain't going to help. You fast forward.
And I really have no problem with Shakur Stevenson saying that. I know a certain amount of people, they'll state that, they don't like Shakur Stevenson saying that if Shakur and Canelo were in the same weight class, that, maybe even Canelo would kill him. Listen, I don't know how that fight would turn out because I don't think that there's any logical way really to play that fight out because I think that if Shakur were Canelo Alvarez's size, I don't know if he necessarily would have the same speed or over the same type of foot speed that he would have at 130, but who knows? Well, what I'll say is this: if you somehow were to have them at the same weight class, would there be at least an opportunity that Shakur could beat Canelo? It's possible. What I'll at least say is this: Shakur Stevenson, the way that I seen him perform against Oscar Valdez last night, Shakur Stevenson is certainly more talented than any of the other Black American fighters that I have seen within the Canelo Alvarez weight class within the past I don't know how many years. The way Shakur Stevenson fights, you know what it kind of reminded me of, you know what it gets me to say? That's the fighter that when I take a look at Shakur Stevenson, that's the fighter that a lot of Demetrius Bubble Andrade fans want Demetrius Bubble Andrade to be, but he just never has been that fighter. Like I've been hearing so many times for the past 10 years about how Demetrius Bubble Andrade is so talented and he was the best 154 pounder and then he was the most talented 160 pounder and then now he's going up to 168 and he'll be the most talented there. I'm sorry, but I've just never seen it. I've seen Demetrius Bubble Andrade against Vanes Martirosyan, Jack Colque. I've seen him against that one Caucasian British fighter, Liam Williams, I believe was his name. I'm sorry, but Demetrius Bubble Andrade, I've never seen a point in Demetrius Bubble Andrade's career where I've taken a look at him and I said, wow, he's the same talent that Shakur Stevenson is. I've never taken a look at Jamal Charlo and said, wow, he's the same talent that Shakur Stevenson is. Never, ever in my life. It is what it is. All right, now, of course, if we're just talking about Shakur would beat Canelo, overall, even at the point right now, of course, that's ridiculous. Canelo Alvarez, he rehydrates somewhere to around 185. I don't know where Shakur Stevenson rehydrates, but I obviously know Shakur Stevenson, he would not beat Canelo Alvarez, of course, with his size. But what I will say is this: Shakur Stevenson is an extraordinarily talented fighter, no doubt about it. I thought he put on a masterclass performance against Oscar Valdez. And let me also talk about that because I had one of the guys in my comment section, I believe, he said, well, I don't know what the game plan was with Oscar. Well, I can tell you what the game plan was with Oscar because his game plan, unfortunately, was the thing that it needed not to be. He thought that he was going to go in there and pick his shots and be able to out-counter Shakur Stevenson. And when you have not only a master counter-puncher, but someone that more than likely is a greater athlete than you, which Shakur Stevenson is and Oscar Valdez, he's just the all-around better athlete, even though he does not have quite the power of what an Oscar Valdez does. But Shakur Stevenson pretty much beats him in almost every other category. He beat him in hand speed, he beat him in foot speed, he beat him in movement. When it came down to it, he was lengthier and clearly bigger than Oscar Valdez, at least by a little bit. He was the, slightly bigger guy. When you have a fighter like that has all those advantages, there's certain fighters that you need to know how to box and pick your shots, and there's certain fighters that, You know, you're not going to be able to completely outbox this guy like you were able to this other dude like a Miguel Berchelt. It was not going to work that way. You had to get rough and dirty with this guy. Oscar Valdez was not willing to do it enough. And I think that taking a look at the look on his face throughout the fight, he knew more than likely, even years prior, that Shakur Stevenson more than likely was going to beat him anyway. But anyways.
To present day, after Shakur Stevenson completely dominates and pitches a shutout, defeating Oscar Valdez, while Canelo Alvarez was in attendance supporting his teammate Oscar Valdez, Shakur Stevenson takes to the mic, and this is what he says.
Hey, this victory means everything. I told y'all what I was going to do. I said I'm going to beat Valdez, Canelo, and Eddie Reynoso. That was my game plan. Beat the whole team, and I feel good about it. Much respect to them. No disrespect to them, but that was my game plan.
Did Oscar Valdez bring out the best in you, and how did he bring out the best?
Oh, most definitely. Oscar Valdez is a tough champion. I don't take nothing away from him. He got good power. He's rough, rugged, and he'll be a champion after this.
So you say after this, and everybody wants to know what the next step is. You've got 2 of the belts and the lineal Ring Magazine belt. And now Shakur, a big moment for you, a huge night for you. Was this the birth of a superstar?
Yes. I'm a superstar in this sport.
I agree. I think that Shakur Stevenson, at least from a talent perspective, I do believe that he is a superstar. I believe that Shakur Stevenson is a very great star. And it looked like the talent was there, but I did, of course, have to see him perform before I really put him on that superstar level. It's very clear that Shakur Stevenson, that he is, at least in terms of a talent level, that he is a superstar level talent, in my opinion. Now, is he a superstar? Maybe in terms of, gravitating the numbers. Time and time will tell on that, but what I will say is this. He did get a very good start. I've seen a multitude of, very well-renowned pro athletes there. Ezekiel Elliott, the running back for the Dallas Cowboys, I believe was there. Nate Diaz, I believe was there. There was a couple of other people there as well that I recognized. So Shakur Stevenson is getting a very, very good start. He's getting very decent promotion, at least from what it seems. And he's a very, very excellent fighter. The only thing that I'll say about Shakur Stevenson is that, he does have to be careful when he starts moving up in weight. Because I'm not sure if his power is going to translate kind of like what, when Terrence Bud Crawford moved up in weight. And one thing I did notice about Shakur Stevenson in that fight is that he does need to keep his hands up a little bit more. And I did even state that in my fight prediction. That is, probably the only major fault that I really see in Shakur Stevenson's, style or his boxing ability is that sometimes he needs to keep his guard up a little bit more. Because Oscar Valdez was hitting him with a certain amount of right hands, which is one of the punches that I said that he would need to land. But Oscar Valdez was just not using his jab whatsoever. He was not willing overall to put his craw in his face. He was not using his jab whatsoever. He was discouraged overall by Shakur Stevenson's jab. Not only that, but Oscar Valdez, even though he's not a bad jabber, he's not an all-time great jabber. He's not a person that always uses his jab to the best of his ability. And he needed to. And he didn't do it in the fight.
Line him up, name him. I'm ready for whoever. I'm ready for whoever.
You were naming names before because you had Oscar Valdez as your target. What's your target now?
Anybody, any of the champions. I might go collect all the belts at 130, become undisputed. I deserve to be a superstar, so this is what I got to do.
Devin Haney's in the house. He's going to be fighting George Kambosos in Australia. Is that a step up for you in the future?
Most definitely. Devin is definitely a huge fight for me. Devin is a hell of a fight.
There's a lot of fights at the 135-pound division that, in my opinion, are very, very big for Shakur Stevenson. And I think that people are already talking about the 135-pound division because they know that there's not really going to be any fighter at the 130-pound division. Oscar Valdez was pretty much going to be the only fighter that maybe was going to provide Shakur Stevenson with a challenge. He clearly was not up to the task. It's very clear that, in my opinion, that the only fighters that are really going to give Shakur Stevenson a challenge, at least if they're at their best, is either going to be Vasily Lomachenko, Devin Haney, Gervonta Tank Davis. There might be a couple of others that I'm missing. Maybe even Ryan Garcia if he gets a little bit more polished. And I know, taking a look at his last fight performance, he didn't look extraordinarily, great. But I'll give him a little bit of a break. He hadn't fought in about a year and a half, I believe. And on top of that, he was coming off of a right hand surgery. So I'll give him a little bit of a break. But Ryan Garcia, very, very physically gifted. He just does have to increase on certain, skill sets. But we'll see what happens.
But respect and love for Devin. But we can line it up in the future, too.
Okay, so you guys just heard right there. Shakur Stevenson, he boldly said in front of a pro-Mexican crowd, I just beat Canelo, Alvarez, Oscar Valdez, and Reynoso, all in the same night. I'm telling you guys right now, Canelo Alvarez is thanking.
I really don't have a problem with him saying that. Shakur Stevenson just won the biggest fight of his career. Let the young man be confident. I really don't have a problem with that. You know, he can say basically whatever he wants to say. You know, I really don't have an issue with that. Now, of course, if he were stating something like, you know, he would beat Canelo even, you know, with his size, and of course that would be something that's ridiculous. But I think basically all Shakur Stevenson was saying is that, you know, he basically beats not only Oscar Valdez, the plan of Oscar Valdez, but also the Eddie Reynoso corner, and also the advice of Mr. Sewell Canelo Alvarez. So maybe in some way of a way was he kind of maybe, you know, kind of putting it out there that he believes that if you were in the same weight class as Canelo Alvarez that he would beat Canelo? Maybe. It's very highly possible. But even if he was saying that, I really can't have a huge problem with that. Because if you're a fighter that is on the talent level of a Shakur Stevenson, even if you're within the top 10 pound for pound, it really doesn't matter who you are. You could be Josh Taylor. If you are a person all in all that believes that, you know, you're the true #1 pound for pound fighter, or that you're a top 10 pound for pound fighter, you should believe that you would beat anyone within the boxing circuit. You should believe that you are the true #1 pound for pound fighter, and that you would beat anyone out there, you know, if you were in the same weight class as them. So I can't really have a huge problem with what Shakur Stevenson said.
God that he doesn't have to fight in Shakur Stevenson's division. He's thanking God that he doesn't have to fight in the welterweight division, where Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford are at. I truly believe that Canelo Alvarez, he deep down feels sorry for his countrymen.
You know, it's very interesting that DontesBoxingNation just had to say that. He said it's very, you know, Canelo Alvarez is lucky that he doesn't have to fight in that of the welterweight division. You know, in the past, when Terrence Crawford allegedly called out Canelo Alvarez, and I'm not really truly serious how he was, DontesBoxingNation once upon a time said that he wanted to see Canelo versus Terrence Crawford. The reason why that is because when Vasily Lomachenko was ranked as the #1 pound for pound fighter, he wanted to see Terrence Bud Crawford versus Vasily Lomachenko, because he did not like the fact that many people were ranking Vasily Lomachenko as the #1 pound for pound fighter, and he wanted Vasily Lomachenko's ass to get torn in two. And it's the same thing overall, you know, with other things. But you notice now that when it comes to Terrence Crawford, once upon a time, he had to kind of keep that same energy. But now he's basically addressing that Terrence Bud Crawford, that he is too small for Canelo, you know. But, you know, you should keep that same energy, Dante. If you wanted to see Terrence Crawford versus Vasily Lomachenko, someone who's a natural 130 pounder versus someone who's a natural 147 pounder, why not see Terrence Bud Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. versus that of Canelo Alvarez? If they're supposed to be way more talented than Canelo Alvarez, that should make those fights 50-50.
That have to fight very athletic.
Now, of course, am I really stating that I would actually really like to see those fights? Not unless Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford also won a belt at the 160 pound division. Not until overall that were to happen. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know if they're ever even going to get there. So we'll see what happens.
Skilled, undefeated black fighters like Shakur Stevenson and all the other ones. So while Canelo Alvarez is thanking God he doesn't have to fight these dangerous, undefeated black American boxers, so are a lot of the racist fans that support Canelo Alvarez. Now, sure, they're going to stay on.
I love how DontesBoxingNation always calls other people, you know, racist. It's just so funny to me because this dude is one of the biggest racists, one of the biggest dopes out there that I've personally ever seen. It's like, dude, who gives you the right overall to cast stones? It's like Dante overall doesn't even live overall in a glass house. He lives in a plastic house. Overall, DontesBoxingNation has no right to throw stones at anyone because Dante is one of the biggest dipshit racists out here that overall could be commentating on boxing, period.
And they're going to say in the comment section, oh man, Canelo beat Shakur Stevenson easy. But under their breath, they're saying, thank God Canelo Alvarez does.
Well, what I say is this: if Shakur Stevenson was the same speed, and if overall, you know, let's just say the Shakur Stevenson with that speed and athleticism, that if he were at the 168 or the 160 pound division, he would be a major threat to anyone there, even including Canelo Alvarez. The problem is that there's just no fighter that is there like that. You know, a lot of people tried to say that Demetrius Bubba Andrade was that fighter. Demetrius Bubba Andrade is nowhere near the talent. I'm sorry, he's just not the talent that Shakur Stevenson is. But of course, I don't always like to do those higher weight class, lower weight class comparisons because the lower weight class fighters, especially anywhere from 130 to 147, they're usually going to be faster. They're usually going to be quicker. So like I said, I don't always like those comparisons.
Have to fight any Shakur Stevensons. Now, getting back to Oscar Valdez. Oscar Valdez, he had a look of concern before this fight, going into the fight, during the
I agree.
fight, and even after the fight. Because Oscar, he knew the chances of beating Shakur Stevenson was slim. And this is obvious.
I agree with you. Oscar Valdez, the whole entire time against Shakur Stevenson, he basically looked like he knew that the only way that he was possibly going to win over Shakur Stevenson is if he possibly knocked him out. And I think that, Oscar Valdez, I think that he could have had the potential of beating Shakur Stevenson had he employed a little bit of a different strategy early on. But once he started feeling somewhat of the power of Shakur Stevenson, and also, he was very, very hard to hit, which of course we all know that that was going to happen anyway, he got very, very discouraged. And that happens sometimes when you have a fighter, even if they are a great boxer, like that of an Oscar Valdez, at least to a degree, they get very, very discouraged against that of the greater boxer. We've seen that a little bit against Gennady Golovkin, against Canelo Alvarez, actually in both fights. We've seen that a little bit against, when Canelo fought Floyd Mayweather Jr. We've seen that when Deontay Wilder fought Tyson Fury. We've seen that with a multitude of other fighters. Muhammad Ali, when he fought George Foreman got discouraged after a while against Muhammad Ali because they just take it to another level.
Obviously, the reason why Oscar Valdez had been avoiding this fight for so long. I think it's been 3 to 5 years. But we have to still give Oscar Valdez more credit than we would give a Canelo Alvarez for even having.
And this is the main reason why I review a video like this. Because once again, Dante's Boxing Nation will have you believe that Canelo Alvarez is just out here fighting kittens or cupcakes. Once again, his next fight is over a fighter that is basically going to be a decent amount bigger than him, a very great athlete, and has been undefeated for the past several years with a very great amateur and Olympic pedigree. So once again, the reason why I review these videos is because certain things need to be put in their proper context. And Dante never does that shit, especially when it comes to Canelo, because he hates the man's guts. He can't stand him.
The heart to get in the ring with someone like Shakur Stevenson. Because if Canelo...
Right, but there are no fighters, there are no black fighters, excuse me, when it comes down to within those weight divisions that are like a Shakur Stevenson. There's no black fighters. I don't care if you're talking about Jermell Charlo, Danny Jacobs, whoever it may be, even that new Cuban cat, I can't remember what the hell, David Morrell Jr., I believe is his name, Demetrius Bouboundre. There are no black fighters around that weight division that are on the same talent level as a Shakur Stevenson. Not even just talking about speed or his athleticism, but just talking about his boxing ability. Shakur Stevenson, you can tell that he's a greater talent, at least at this point in time in his career, and to be quite honest with you, within not even 20 fights, he has a better resume. He has a better win in his career over Oscar Valdez than what Jermell Charlo and Demetrius Bouboundre do combined with their resume. So I'm sorry, but if you're trying to make the case that Canelo, he's been avoiding these undefeated black fighters, please do. Now, don't get me wrong. That's not me saying that I've agreed with every single move that Canelo Alvarez has done. But Canelo has fought almost every fighter out there under the sun within this weight divisions. Now, what of course I like to see the Jermell Charlo, and David Benavidez fights just as much as anyone else. Maybe even the Demetrius Bouboundre fight. Of course I would, but right now Canelo Alvarez I think has bigger issues. He has bigger fish to fry. And right now he's taking a look at that 175-pound division. And once again, let me state this again. I've stated this 76 times prior, and I'll probably state it 1,000 more times because these narratives more than likely are never going to stop. Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev, in my view, yeah, you can label them overall, say that they're Russian fighters, that they're European fighters, all you want to. Some of them European fighters, man, they'll whoop your ass. And Dimitri Bivol, he's no joke. Really, if we're going to go there, Dimitri Bivol even has that of a better resume than what a Jermell Charlo or Demetrius Andre do. Because at least he has a win over a couple of former champions. How many former champions has Demetrius Bouboundre actually really beat? To be honest with you, I really can't even name one. Jermell Charlo, he defeated Julian J. Rock Williams. He's got that win. There might have been another one, Austin Trout, I believe, when he was pretty much done. But besides that, who has Jermell Charlo really beat? Now, don't get me wrong. That's not me stating that I don't want to see the fight. But don't sit here and tell me that Canelo, that he just has his career on easy mode. Once again, dude, not only did he just unify the 168-pound division with very decently talented fighters, sure, they might have been Caucasian, but you can't just list that, all the time, basically say, oh, they're Caucasian, so they're the weakest of the weak. But you notice all in all that Devin Haney versus George Kambosos, you notice that all of a sudden that's a super fight. And if Devin Haney can win that fight, all of a sudden he'll be entered into the top 10 pound per pound. So which Caucasian fighters are elite and which ones aren't? The ones overall that, Canelo Alvarez faces aren't elite, but the ones overall, the black fighters that you like especially, all of a sudden those Caucasian fighters are elite. All of a sudden Sergey Kovalev was a decently great fighter, or George Kambosos was a decently great fighter. Cut the shit. Like I said, you have to keep the same energy and context. I can tell the difference between a decently talented and great fighter. Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez are very decent fighters. They're nowhere near on the same level as what a Dimitri Bivol is. Sorry, he's just not, or they're not.
Has been avoiding Demetrius Andrade and Charlo for 6 years. There's absolutely no way he would have fought Shakur Stevenson. Now, I shouldn't say no way. The only way he would have fought Shakur Stevenson is if he was outweighing Shakur Stevenson by at least 15 to 20 pounds, just like he was when he fought Floyd Mayweather. And Floyd had already moved up 5 weight classes.
Floyd Mayweather Jr. was a natural 135 to 140 pounder. That's what Floyd Mayweather Jr. was. Now, Canelo, of course, at the time, he was at 154. He probably rehydrated to at least the natural middleweight at the time. But Canelo Alvarez fought Floyd Mayweather Jr. when he was debatably at the best point in his career. And he was the #1 pound-per-pound fighter. So just stop it, Dante. Canelo Alvarez took the fight because he wanted to overall be great, just like a certain amount of other fighters before him took the fight overall, with Floyd Mayweather Jr. because they wanted to be great as well. Now, once again, if you want to state that, maybe Canelo has made some moves here and there that maybe overall, have not been, all that great, I somewhat get it. Jamal Charlo, though, I'm sorry, but I don't see Jamal Charlo really having that realistic of a chance over Canelo Alvarez. It just is what it is. And same with Demetrius Boo Andrade. You can claim that Canelo has ducked those black fighters all you want to, but I'm sorry, but to me, those guys, they're not anywhere near on the same level as a Floyd Mayweather Jr. They're really not even on the same level as a Shakur Stevenson. And Shakur don't even have 20 fights.
If Canelo Alvarez and Shakur Stevenson were both naturally the same weight, there's no way Canelo would have took the fight. Because Canelo's actions today has already proven that.
Well, Canelo's actions have basically proved us that Canelo overall takes a lot of high-grade challenges. He's taken Caleb Plant, he's taken Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, Sergey Kovalev, Miguel Cotto, Danny Jacobs, who was a black fighter at the best point in his career, Araceli Lara, who was a black fighter at the best point in his career, Floyd Mayweather Jr., even though he lost that fight, who was a black fighter at the best point in his career. He also fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., I believe he had a couple losses at that point, but he pretty much overall was going to be the best that he ever was anyway at that point. Canelo also has fought a multitude of other great fighters as well, like a Gennady Triple G Golovkin, who in my view was always way greater than that of a Demetrius Boo Andrade or Jamal Charlo, or at least way more of a threat. I'm sorry, but no one has ever taken a look at Demetrius Boo Andrade and Jamal Charlo, at least anyone with an objective and logical eye, and said, wow, that guy really reminds me of Gennady Golovkin or Artur Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol. It's just never happened. It is what it is. At least I don't take a look at him that way.
Mentioned the revelation that Canelo Alvarez's own trainer Reynoso just made when he came out and he said, and I quote, "Black American boxers are the most difficult to fight. Whenever you're fighting against a black fighter, a black American fighter, it's going to be a complicated fight." This is Canelo.
It certainly can be, because black American fighters, of course, have shown throughout history that they can certainly be the most dominant, the most slick, sometimes over highly, intelligent fighters in that of the sport of boxing. They're certainly very, very talented. So what Eddie Reynoso said is not completely untrue. But once again, Dante, of course, is going to try to twist that and basically say that, well, that's basically Eddie Reynoso saying that we don't want any parts of Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade or, all these other African-American fighters. Once again, there's only 2 black fighters, black American fighters anyway, but I'll include black fighters as well, because the majority of black fighters that are also around there that aren't from America are Cuban, and they're very, very decently slick and very decently intelligent boxers as well. Canelo Alvarez has pretty much fought every single boxer within his weight divisions, besides, Andrade, Benavidez, and Charlo. And I'm sorry, but those guys, in my view, they really don't have any more than a 30% chance over Canelo Alvarez. So, once again, I get it. I get why a certain amount of people maybe would think this. But at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, once again, has fought many great challenges in his career. And this next fight against Dimitri Bivol, in my view, he's a decently bigger threat than any of those fighters what they ever would be.
Alvarez's own trainer saying this. And it's just so ironic because even before Canelo Alvarez's trainer said this, you guys have always heard me use this analogy at least for the last 5 years. Canelo Alvarez, he's been constantly putting the video game on easy mode as opposed to putting it on hard mode. And Canelo...
No, he has not been putting the video game on he has not been putting the quote-unquote video game on easy mode. Dante, you're full of shit. Just like it happened for the past several years. Now, don't get me wrong. Would I like to see the Demetrius Bubu Andrade and Jamal Charlo fights just as much as everyone else? Of course. But let's cut the crap. Once again, you can't call the fighter a complete cherry picker when he's fought the names that I just listed. You can't, criticize Canelo Alvarez to such a great degree, at least with a logical and objective eye, and say basically that he puts his career on easy mode when he's fought Miguel Cotto, Chavez Jr., Danny Jacobs, Sergey the Crusher Kovalev, Gennady Golovkin, Adesanya Lara, Danny Jacobs as well. I'm trying to think of other fighters. Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith. All those fighters were very, very decent champions when Canelo Alvarez fought them. And then his next fight is going to be over Dimitri Bivol. So cut the shit, man. It is what it is. But once again, when it comes to Terence Bud Crawford fighting those repeated bums like Jose Benavidez and Aegis Kavaliauskas, all of a sudden, oh, wow, this dude's a bad motherfucker. Like, come on.
Alvarez's trainer just admitted that...
Once again, it's very interesting how there was none of these criticisms when Andre Ward beat Sergey the Crusher Kovalev, when they were trying to allege that Crusher Kovalev, I believe, was not on the same level as Adonis Stevenson, at least for a partial time. When it came down to it, if we're going by that, narrative of the black fighters are always greater than every other fighter out there with no context behind it, then why does Andre Ward, in your eyes, get regarded as a top-grade pound-for-pound fighter when he never fought the elite black fighter that overall was at the light heavyweight division? Because Andre Ward went on nothing but a Caucasoid tour. It just is what it is. He has a problem with Canelo because he doesn't like Canelo, because Canelo can be counted as a Caucasoid Hispanic. That's why. It is what it is. He don't like Canelo.
Fighting against undefeated black.
Like I said, you can't count Canelo Alvarez's career overall as just being on easy mode. A fighter, all in all, that has their career in easy mode, overall, at least, recently as I can think of, would be someone like Terence Bud Crawford at the welterweight division before he fought someone like a Sean Porter. Maybe someone overall like, if I'm maybe thinking of someone else, I can't really even think of someone else right now. Someone like a Deontay Wilder before he fought Luis Ortiz and Tyson Fury. Or someone that, if we are to talk about a Caucasian or Latino fighter really quick, maybe that of a Chavez Jr. before he fought Sergio Martinez. Or maybe, if I were to think of a Caucasian fighter, I can't really think of one, at least at the recent moment in time. I don't know, maybe someone like a David Price. But no, you can't allege that Canelo Alvarez's career has been on easy mode. Just cut the shit.
Fighters is putting the video game on hard, or in some cases, extremely hard. So at the end of the day, even though Oscar Valdez completely got dominated by Shakur Stevenson, you got to give him credit for putting the video game on extremely hard mode. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next.
Right, but Canelo Alvarez has put his career on hard mode ever since basically 2012 when he fought, I believe, Austin Trout, when he ended up beating Miguel Cotto, who is another undefeated black fighter. But it is what it is. Once again, don't get me wrong, I would love to see the Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Bubu Andrade fight. I mean, technically only Jamal Charlo at this point, because Demetrius Andrade, I've never really been that impressed with them. And I don't think I'll know that the fight in terms of market-wise is just really going to do that great anyway. But, if that fight did happen, I would be very particularly interested in it. But like I said, Canelo, in terms of black fighters, he really only hasn't fought two. And really, to be real about those two black fighters, in my opinion, they're nowhere near the threat as what some of the other bigger threats could be out there, like a Dimitri Bivol or a Beterbiev. Canelo Alvarez in this next fight against Dimitri Bivol, no matter what, no matter what way you want to slice it, this is a very, very extraordinarily tough fight for Canelo, especially if he does not put the right strategy out there and if overall he does not put the right cards on the table. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Just thought that I would talk about that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.